You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Callie Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Callie Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
Before we get started, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters.
All the things that you won't do.
Did you know 81% of Americans would like to become a published author? Chances are you might be one of them. What's stopping you? Writing and publishing a book takes a lot of work and is expensive, right? Well, not anymore. For your next book project, or even your first, team up with Hassle-Free Books. They make it so easy to become an author. They remove all of the fuss and struggle and make it smooth and simple. And it's far more affordable than you could ever imagine. Go to hasslefreebooks.com and use promo code UNPAUSE to receive a 10% discount off of any book project. Get started right away and become a published author in as little as 45 days. For your free 1-hour book formula guide, which will show you just how painless it can be to become an author, head to hasslefreebooks.com today.
All right. Thanks again for joining me. Let's get started with today's show.
Took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of life.
Welcome back to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes of the Addictions Academy and the Addictions Coach. My guest today is Katrina King, and you will know her from her story featured in the FBI's Chasing the Dragon documentary. It is used in schools and communities, and it's going to help educate the public on the dangers of substance abuse, as well as the underlying factors that often lead to the full manifestation of the disorders. Katrina advocates for the suffering from substance abuse and their families and trauma survivors. She's the founder of Recovered Purpose, and she's dedicated her life to serving others. Welcome, Katrina. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Give me some of your background story and how you ended up being featured in Chasing the Dragon.
Okay, let me just sort of back up a moment and take myself back in time here. My story didn't start out very well early in life, but, I managed to overcome a lot of obstacles, was earning a 6-figure salary, working in telecom, and then there were some layoffs and things, and I found myself out of work. And so around that time, my daughter would have been about 12 at that point. And my daughter, between the job loss and my daughter, started showing some rebellion because she had been assaulted. We had tried to deal with it with law enforcement and weren't able to, fully prosecute. So she sunk into a pretty bad depression. And while I was struggling with that because it was extremely traumatic for her and for me, I fell down my stairs one night, kind of hopping, in the middle of the night. I kind of read comments from people who are, nasty, and they'll say things like, who runs down their stairs in the middle of the night? Well, I did. I was kind of hopping because I didn't want to fully wake up, and I kind of hopped, too many stairs over and landed on my back on the wood floor.
Oh,
and I never experienced pain before like that. I've been, always a very healthy person other than, asthma or whatever, but I never had any issues with pain, never went to the doctor for pain. So I landed on my back. It hurt pretty badly, but, I was able to get up the next day. I went to work. I've always wear really, really tall shoes. And at that point, I'd been laid off and I was working somewhere else. And I walked into the place, and for a few minutes I was okay. And the next thing I knew, I was in severe pain, and I didn't realize what it was. It was sciatica. It progressed. I kind of lived with it for about 4 weeks, and I was hobbling at that point. And one of my coworkers had been a pharmaceutical sales rep, and she said, Katrina, you got to get to the doctor, but hey, you know what? I have these samples, whatever, just take them home. And she knew I was pretty green, so she was like, well, just take one. And I was like, okay. Well, I didn't take pills at all because I knew I had a family history of alcoholism and a number of other things, so I was very vigilant like that.
Yeah.
But when I got home, I was winding down the night, and I would have wine every night. At the end of the day, I wouldn't drink more than one glass. I was very, like I said, very disciplined like that. And so I took the tablet. I was like, I got to get some sleep tonight because I was in so much pain all the time I couldn't even move from left to right. So I took the pill, and I was like, gosh, I waited a few minutes. It wasn't working. I took another one. And then I would say probably about 20 minutes after the second one, I just had a complete, I don't even know, it was like this thing snapped in my brain, and all of the stress of work and layoffs and losing my home, and, because I was starting to get behind a mortgage and my daughter's issues, everything just sort of went away. And I was able to cope, I thought, as the days went by. I went to my doctor and, told him what was going on. He prescribed me something right away. At that point, I was in my mid-30s, I had never gotten a prescription for anything, so they trusted me. And I trusted myself, and I took them, ongoing for probably a good couple of months. I didn't look at what they were. I didn't look at the side of the bottle. I didn't look in the bag. I didn't look at the instructions, because everything I ever read, pharmaceutical stuff, always has a long list of things, that side effects, etc., and all of them refer to the same sort of thing. You can dizziness, blah, 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 so I sort of didn't think twice when I read that. So at about the third month, I went back in for another refill, and the doctor wouldn't fill it. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And I went home, and by the second day, I was violently ill, couldn't get out of bed.
Oh, boy.
I was really, really sick.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand it. It didn't make sense. So I started, I called the doctor's office. I'm like, I'm so sick. I don't know what's going on. Then I did some research, and then I put it together. Oh, my God. It's withdrawal. They said, oh, well, it's you coming off the medicines. It's okay. It's normal. And I said, what am I supposed to do? Because I'm also in pain. So what do you suggest I do?
Katrina, what were your symptoms? What were you actually experiencing?
Well, at that point, I thought it was the end of the world. But gosh, I went through way worse later on. But it was severe neuromuscular pain, twitching. I was nauseated. I was throwing up quite a bit. Swelling had started to come on because I was taking more and more of them at a time, and because of the acetaminophen in them. Of course, it was affecting my liver and kidneys. For the withdrawal piece of it, I was sweating profusely, chills, couldn't sleep, that sort of thing. And when I would sleep, it was just really, probably went through that for about 2 nights before I was able to get another prescription.
Oh, so, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So he referred me into pain management. And I went to pain management, and within a few seconds, they wrote me a prescription. It took me from Vicodin, Percocet, on occasion, to, forgive me if I'm wrong because it's been years, but I think he started me out at like a 40 milligram Oxycontin and a 30 milligram or 15 milligram Roxicodone, which is basically, right. Those are the Percocets, the Oxycodones without the Tylenol on them, because they said, well, you don't want to be taking so much Tylenol. It's so bad for your liver and kidneys, which I agreed because that was swelling up so bad.
Yeah.
So I got them home, started using them. It was, awesome. The man I was with at that time, he's like, looked at the prescription, and he's like, because by this time, fast forward, I was in between insurances. I had no insurance at that point, and I was having to pay out of pocket. And I was going to, as the months went by, I was paying these PAs or, whomever, several $100s at a time, and then paying for the prescription, and it was just ridiculous amounts of money. So we walked out, and it was a paper prescription. He says, we could just make this ourselves. And I said, there's no way, because I would never break the law. I wouldn't even steal bubblegum from a store. And he said, well, they're not doctors, they're just play doctors. They're not even nurses, right? And he's like, just do it. And so I was like, and finally talked me into doing it. I wrote one up, and I said, I'm not running it, and you're doing it. So first time I did that, I gave it to him. He walked in, and 5 minutes later, he walks out with a bag in hand, and therein basically set off a chain of events where it got to the point where we were writing prescriptions every day or every other day, and then we had to organize other folks, and those folks would go in, run prescriptions, split them with us, and that sort of thing. Sort of kind of come up with our own little way to keep ourselves well, if that makes sense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so at that point, I'm just going to fast forward through a lot because there's so much that happened, but it got to a point where, he had gotten into trouble, so the house was raided a couple times. This was the second home I'd owned, and it got to the point where, I was so behind on the mortgage. I had taken a second mortgage. We were upside down, so I ended up having to give it back to the bank. And instead of going and finding a place to rent because of my addiction being so bad, I was so disoriented, I moved into a high-end residential hotel for a while.
Now, let me interject and ask you this. So, to this point, you were given a doctor's prescription. So did you know you were addicted, or was it more like, well, the doctor gave me this, it's something I need, and now they're taking it away? What were you thinking? What was your headspace?
So I had absolutely zero clue until about the third month in of taking them that even what the drug was. I just thought it was just a painkiller. About the third month, and I knew it was giving me the funny feeling, but I didn't think much of that. About the third month in, when they stopped giving them to me and referred me into pain management, that's when I realized that it was the pharmaceutical equivalent of heroin. And at that point, though, I still didn't feel stigma. I didn't feel any shame or any issue with it because it was a prescription from a doctor. I mean, I truly felt that, well, it's okay. It's coming from a doctor. It's not like I'm out there prostitute. I'm not, I had all this.
Right. That was my story, because I was a food addict, and back then I didn't meet the DSM for, any type of eating disorder, because they had two, and I was neither of the two. They sent me to the fat doctor, and the fat doctor put me on fen-phen and legal speed. And I had no idea what I was on until I went from 160 pounds to 90 pounds and couldn't get off of it. And that's when I went, I'm on pharmaceutical grade speed. So they had the exact same issue. So now, how are you getting the drug? So did you steal a doctor's pad? Did I hear you right? Or what did you do?
No, I wasn't going to do that. I felt that was way too risky. No, I actually, in the state of Virginia, and I know that California doesn't do this, but some of the other states do, but in the state of Virginia, the doctors now have this electronic, prescription system, and it helps them in a lot of ways because they can monitor what they're, doing more. They can cross-reference it with the state's, list and all that sort of thing. But the problem with it is that, and this makes no sense to me, they will not send a prescription from the doctor's computer directly to a pharmacy if it is a narcotic, or a scheduled drug. Now, if it's narcotic or scheduled drug, they actually have to print the prescription out and hand it to you, but they can't send it electronically. So they feel like there would be more potential of fraud or whatever sending it directly versus printing out a piece of paper that looks like something you can make from Word, right, Microsoft Word, and handing it to you, and then you take that in. So what I did is I studied the variances of the two different doctors I'd gone to and saw how it was done and saw that there was no real magic. There was no code on the bottom, nothing like that. So I went in and basically just recreated, and then I had really great skills with forging, and so the signatures were spot on. And I would create personalities, right? So their names, made-up persons, birth dates, etc., and establish a regular record with that pharmacy. Once I had good luck with the pharmacy, then I would go back to that one on a monthly basis with this person, okay?
So let me, just so our listeners understand, you are this totally normal person out there doing normal things who falls down the steps in the middle of the night, which I've done that, so I can completely understand that, end up getting addicted to an opiate, doctor-prescribed opiate, and the doctor goes, okay, now you don't need it. Now you're in withdrawal, and now you're going, I really, really want this drug. So you're now conniving and manipulating and coming up with ways to circumvent the system to get what you need. Did I hear you correctly?
That's right. And the doctor, he never told me that I didn't need it anymore. He actually agreed that I did. They did, some they looked at some scans and they said, oh, look this, you have all this damage, you need a surgery, which I'll get to that later, but he was definitely in agreement I needed them, except that he was a general practitioner, a family doctor, so he was not able to continue to prescribe because then, of course, he'd be flagged. So he needed to refer me into pain management. And at pain management, well, that was a free-for-all. They can prescribe you as many as you say you needed back then. But it still wasn't enough because between my partner and I, we were, consuming large quantities, and then we'd have to pay the doctors so much money for them. So that's when he came up with the idea of, why don't we just write these ourselves? I studied them. I did it spot on, sent him in. He was successful, and that, spurred a chain of reaction of manipulating what looked like to law enforcement later as kingpin activity, but it really was just a small network of people who were already sick trying to get well.
Oh, wow. Okay, so now here you are out there committing a crime, which you never set out to do because you ended up on a drug that was prescribed by a doctor with no detox protocol.
That's exactly right. Yep. He never even suggested detox. Never came up. Never even said the word addiction. He was a really good man, and I think in hindsight, a lot of times people just didn't want to think of it that way. But he just sort of said, this is not a drug that I can continue to prescribe. You need some long-term help. You need a surgery, whatever. But no. In fact, when I was at one of the, I was actually caught once by one of the doctors. I was caught a total of 3 times, and I had done hundreds. And I know that's terrible. It's not something I'm bragging about. I feel really badly about it. But of the one time I was caught, the doctor, the man that owned the doctor's office, he wasn't even a doctor. When I came into my regular visit, that's when, they showed up there to arrest me. And he actually said, as I was leaving, he says, well, when you get released from the jail, we'll continue to see you. We'll continue to treat you. But we can't get away with breaking the law. We can't allow that. But one other doctor that I've been to when this all went down, instead of talking about detox, they were like, that's it. You're excused from the clinic. That's it. That was it. Once they realized that you were addicted, that physically addicted, whatever they want to call it, that's when they would just cut you off. That's it. Wouldn't give you a recommendation. They were done. That's it.
That's the major problem with our healthcare system. And right there, the first doctor was, okay, you broke the law. I can't have you do that because my license is in jeopardy, but we're still going to give you the medication you want. Just keep coming back and paying us. So you have that. Yep. And then you have the second doctor going, we'll treat you, but as soon as we realize you're addicted, well, now we don't know what to do with you. Even though we caused you to be addicted, just get out of our office with no services.
Exactly.
That's what's wrong with our healthcare system. It's not patient.
Totally. And no, absolutely. Now, I'm one of these people who believes in personal responsibility because at some point I did realize that, I had a problem. And I like to speak to that with people because people will say, well, why didn't you do something about it? Now, I realize that was back in 2010, 11. A lot has changed. But back then, I did try to seek help. I truly did. I went on 2 separate occasions to the emergency room, expressed my issues. They said, well, we don't have a place. We have a place next door, but that's for alcohol detox. We don't have anything for opiate detox. I was able to find a doctor who someone said, oh, they prescribe Suboxone. And I was thinking, this is miracle cure because everyone told me it was. And go to him, and he prescribes it incorrectly. He gives me, instead of giving me the Subutex first, then Suboxone, because the Suboxone has the blocker in it, he gave me the Suboxone first, so it threw me into a full-on withdrawal.
You went
very violently.
Precipitated withdrawal. Oh my God, that's worse than a heroin withdrawal.
Right. And so what I said when that happened, I was like, this is the cure. Screw it. I would rather be on this other stuff. So I didn't investigate it further. That was it. I was done with it. And so between the 2 ER visits and the Suboxone doctor, I attempted to try to go cold turkey on 2 occasions, and I couldn't do it. I realize in hindsight I could have, but at that time my mind was telling me I couldn't. And it would get to a certain point where I was like, I can't do this. I can't. And I'd lay on that couch, and about this time my daughter's, coming of age. She's an adult, and she knows people who are also abusing pills, and she says, Mom, I can get you something. I'll get you something. And I'm like, no, Kirstyn, no way. I don't know. But then she'd bring it home, and what do? There it is. There's your relief. There's, you're like, wow. And
let me ask you, did you ever graduate to heroin?
I did. There were many times that I was without, and so I would use. The thing about heroin that I hated is it was always inconsistent. That's why I didn't go all the way with it. I remember the first time I, tried it, I loved it, and it was so weird because when I was a teenager, I knew a heroin addict, and I remember saying, "I'll never do that stuff," because she'd pass out and die and be sick, and they'd fall asleep, and I thought this thing looks horrible. And so the funny thing is, when I actually did it, I loved the rush. It was better than the pills, but the problem with it is it's inconsistent. It was, you never knew what you were going to get. And it wasn't that I was worried about getting the stuff that would kill me. I was worried about getting something that wouldn't make me well.
Now, so, I'm going to stop you right there. That is exactly what my clients say. I wasn't worried about getting this stuff that would kill me. That's the fentanyl, carfentanil. I just wanted to get a decent high consistently. So it's even more interesting because when you're talking opiates, they hijack the brain. All the sensors in the brain are hijacked. So rational decision making goes out the window, and people don't understand that. It's not like having a few glasses of wine. You get drunk, you do something stupid on the front lawn. It's not that. It literally takes over your brain, and you find yourself doing things you would not do to get the drug, to stay having the drug, including taking something that could potentially kill you. So it's important for our listeners to understand that's not rational at this point anymore. Your brain is gone. It is, heroin, opiates have taken over, and you are doing things you wouldn't have done with rational mind.
No way in hell would I have. In fact, I was the mother that would look at mothers who would either cheat on their husband, whatever they do, or stay out late at happy hour. I would look at them and say, how do you put a man, or how do you put alcohol or whatever over your kids? Because my parents had died when I was a kid in a canal accident. So my children were my life. They were my daughter. I say she was my first love. She was. Before that, I had never experienced love like that. They were my everything. And yet these things I was doing to get the drug was jeopardizing them. To tell you how insane it was, I'd be worried. I started going into this hypochondria mode where I was like, I'm going to die soon. I think I'm going to die. I think I have breast cancer. I was running to the doctor left and right for aches and pains, thinking I was going to die. But then I would, use heroin or take 40 pills a day, right? Which kind of makes no sense whatsoever. That's how it was just like, crazy.
It does make sense to me. It makes sense to me because this is what I do. I work with people that are in that stuck point. And I've had so many people come to me on heroin, on Oxy, on Roxy, trying to get off, and I've had people overdose, they've gotten Narcan, et cetera, and they come to me, and as they're detoxing, they have the phantom pains. I had one tell me he swore his elbow was broken. And I looked at him and I said, bend it. And he bended it just fine. I said, your elbow is not broken. He's like, oh my God, I'm in so much horrendous pain. I said, you know why? He said, no. I said, your brain is starting to refire. And it's misfiring. And it's going to misfire. And it's going to suck for the next 6 months. And he looked at me and he said, I don't have 6 months. I cannot be like this for 6 months. And I said, I know. And your only alternative is Suboxone, which is an opiate, which coming off of Suboxone or methadone is even worse than coming off of heroin. And he just looked at me, and I'm like, we're going to kick it old school. I'm going to get you through it. It's going to suck. And I do a detox with cannabis. All my clients go on marijuana to come off. So I got him on cannabis.
Wow.
Yeah. And his symptoms were gone. The pain was gone, the fogginess, the not being able to eat, the nausea, all of it. Restless leg, insomnia, gone. So.
Wow. That was fascinating that you bring that up, because I just had a thought regarding the Chasing the Dragon film. I publicly don't take a position on marijuana because it was never a drug that I had a take it or leave it thing about it, But yet my daughter, the funny thing about that is that in the movie Chasing the Dragon, many people have mentioned that they felt that there was often references to it being a gateway drug and this and that. And I know firsthand that that wasn't what they were trying to imply, because they haven't ever expressed an opinion one way or another, to me at least, on whether they feel it is or isn't. Their position was, well, we just feel like it gets people closer to making a bad decision, people being youth. But the funny thing about that is my daughter was a marijuana user, right? And she used it. She had anxiety after the issues with the assault and things. And she, that was it. She didn't want anything harder. And all of her friends had graduated to much stronger, they were using heroin, they were using pills, they were using Xanax. And Kirstyn didn't want any part of it. What I find interesting is that she had gotten in trouble. She was at a park, and she had a beer in her hand. It was a public park. And she got a ticket for it, but had to go to court. And one of the, punishment for it or whatever was that she had to go on community service and probation for a few months, and she had to do the drug screens. Well, as a result of the drug screen, she couldn't test positive for marijuana.
Oh, boy.
And right, and about that time is when I ended up in jail, and about that time is when she got to the point where she was like, well, I have all this anxiety, mom's gone, all these things are going on, I don't know what to do. She started grabbing people like, well, just do this, do the Xanax. Xanax is what started it for her. And they were like, do this, you don't have, you can't use weed, do this. And she started using the Xanax, and then that progressed to the pain pills that she swore she'd never use. She was scared of needles, and she was, so from that point of view, I often wonder when people, and I'm not saying that I agree or disagree, but I am saying that I know the child I had, and I know how helpful it was for her at that point as an adult, like I said, not a teenager. And then what happened when that option was taken from her, I often wonder what would have been the outcome if it hadn't been, you know what I mean?
And I'm very vocal. I am pro-cannabis. I was the first one in my space at the level that I'm at to come out and go, I'm pro-cannabis, and I took a lot of shit for it. But yeah, I totally believe in it. My theory is this. If you're going to smoke a little weed or take an edible or do CBD oil, number one, the worst you're going to do is eat pizza and play Xbox. You're not robbing anybody. Mm-hmm. You're not dying. Mm-hmm. You're not overdosing on something. You're not driving a car the wrong way on a one-way and killing somebody or killing yourself. You're not suicidal. Mm-hmm. You're not homicidal. If that's the worst you're going to do, then have at it. That's how I feel.
I agree.
And I use it for everything. My clients that have anxiety, I've got a house in Colorado. I send them out there. We meet out there. And it works. I would rather you take an organic product like cannabis versus a big pharma Xanax with all those side effects that end up leading to something else. So when you say, is it a gateway? I've always said no. And I was just on Dr. Frank's show out in LA talking about this, and they're pro-cannabis. And he said, is it a gateway? And I said, no, alcohol is a gateway. And cigarettes are a gateway. And he goes, really? He goes, you're pro-cannabis. I said, it's not a gateway. I said, I used to smoke weed when I was young, and it never led to anything. It was smoking weed because that's what you did. When I got in college, I drank because that's what you did. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to smoke a little weed and then take a drink. They're so opposite. It doesn't lead that way.
I completely 100% agree. My mom was a weed smoker, and she was passive, and their accident wasn't attributed to alcohol or drugs at all. In fact, their accident was coming back from New Year's Eve with nothing in their system because they were rushing back to get to us before the midnight, whatever, and they came around a sharp turn in a canal and drowned. But interestingly enough, they were called druggies. They were called bad guys. They were the bad guys. I came to live with my grandparents. My grandfather was a lifelong alcoholic. He was abusive. He had a history of severe violence. He, had tried to molest me, did with some other family members. He was a really not a great guy. Even when he wasn't drinking, he still had the symptoms. And they were like, that's okay. But my mother, who was never violent, and we felt love in that home, was a weed smoker. So when you're somebody like me, when you try to make the argument, and I picked up before, and I never felt compulsion to keep smoking, but I did with that pill, and I did with that heroin. I felt that compulsion that I couldn't stop. And I'm a very controlling person, right? So I didn't feel that with marijuana, but I felt it with this other drug. So here's my daughter doing well with this one thing, coping. And then that is taken from her with the threat of you'll go to jail. I mean, it makes the case for it. You want to know the truth.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So tell me about this film, Chasing the Dragon. Is this your whole life in there? Do they cover all those things or what? Mm-hmm. So it is everything.
No, they don't cover everything. No, they couldn't possibly. It's my story along with, I think it's 6 others. And basically we're just referencing the period of time around what happened with us around the arrest time and that sort of thing. Because I had gotten arrested eventually because of this stuff, and it caught up with me. They were pursuing me for sort of kingpin charges at that point because they were trying to get me to cooperate. They thought I was working with a bigger organization. I wasn't. it took a lot of time for them to realize in hindsight what actually was happening, but they couldn't wrap their mind around it, that someone could be taking 40 strong painkillers like that, a woman, and still be walking, driving, and everything else. I think they realize now. So, but anyway, it kind of circles around that time and around the time of me going to jail and my daughter and her, what happened to her, the spiral once I went to jail. And basically she went from being a really good girl who had some trauma issues, smoking weed, to being a hardcore pill user, to shooting up, to she had cysts all over her body within a few months, and then she was dead.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, age 20. So it was a very, very fast progression for someone who had never wanted to touch the stuff, was terrified of needles, held herself to this weird moral code. But once I went to jail and her dad went to jail, her brother went to California to live with his dad because he was just 17. He turned 18 the day I woke up in jail, and they were processing me in. And then her boyfriend or her fiance went to England on a government contract. So she was pretty much, this girl who'd been overprotected. She went from overprotected to having no one around, and she couldn't cope with it. So.
Wow. I am so sorry to hear that. Now, do you have remorse and guilt? How do you feel about that situation?
Yes, for a few years after, and these are some of the things that I will probably touch on more than anything else. It's been it's 6 years, October 16th, since I lost her. And in these 6 years, I've been clean. You know what I mean, had a drink or so back then, but for all intents and purposes, clean. And for the first, I want to say at least 4 years, it was guilt, it was regret, it was shame, it was all those things. And yet I didn't feel it on the surface. It wasn't a conscious feeling. It was more expressed in how I allowed myself to be treated. So I went from a person who, I'd experienced, abuse in my life, significant abuse, but as an adult, I tried to not allow myself to be in those situations. I did once I lost Kirstyn. I allowed myself to be emotionally abused, physically abused, cheated on, torn down, whatever. And I was absolutely numb to it. I was like a zombie. I made more dysfunctional choices, not addicted, than I ever did when I was addicted. I was really tormented. And then one day, I understood the difference between accountability and responsibility, cause and effect, versus guilt, right? Mm-hmm. Guilt is a useless emotion. Useless. It has no place because it doesn't teach you anything. It's a punishment for something that punishing myself for what I felt at the time. Everything I ever did was in love. I loved my children. Even getting well, I thought, was my way of loving them, because if I was well, I could be a better mother to them. So in hindsight, I realized that it was a series of bad choices, cause and effect, all these things. I don't blame any one person or anything, but guilt is not the right word. I take accountability and responsibility, because the one thing I realize is that we're always parents. We're never going to stop being their parents, and they will always look to us. That's just the truth, and I think more parents, if they thought of it that way, they might make better choices. So I'm not saying that this disease was a choice necessarily, but the funny thing is I thought I could never get clean, and then I ended up getting clean on the jail cell, floor. You know what I mean? And I got clean. I stayed clean in the 6 years since I've lost my daughter. So that's probably the hardest thing to live with.
Wow. Now you've got a project going on now. Tell me about that and how you morphed into doing that and what that does for you. Does that balance you out? How does that make you feel?
Yeah. Well, so here we are the years later. I didn't jump right into advocacy. In fact, I was like, how absolutely hypocritical would that be? Zero interest. I didn't even know I was just like a walking dead. And then, of course, the Chasing the Dragon came up because the FBI interviewed me on something else, and they were investigating my daughter's death. They wanted to do something on prevention. I agreed. Long story short, they put that out there. So about 2 years ago today, I started deciding to write a little bit to just sort of get some of these feelings out and purge them. And I felt like I'd be met with a lot of judgment, but I was ready for it. And instead, I was met with a lot of understanding and love and people who were touched. And so that spurred, jumping out there and doing more. And since then, I have tried really hard to kind of find my place because I know that I look at this as an addict, as a mother of an addict, as a daughter, granddaughter of an addict, and who's been involved with addicts. So I had a pretty good understanding and also had real world work experience. So I tried to find my place there with my passion, and I could never do it. It seemed like, people don't want to take on a really strong, this is how I feel about it, a really strong, passionate person for whatever reason. And I don't know if my FBI film kind of harmed me, but I decided, okay, well, rather than wait for that train, I'll put something together myself. So that's when I decided to go forward with Recovered Purpose, which is based on those things that I felt would have made a difference in our lives, which is the education at all levels, okay? So from youth to, the employer, workplace, employee assistance programs, et cetera, law enforcement, drug court, that sort of thing. And also on the other end of it, resources in recovery resources and prevention resources in the community, driven by a peer-to-peer model for those who are underinsured, uninsured, and who have no income. So since that's like 90-some% of the population after they become addicted, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a horrible system right now. Our system is so broken. The services that people need, they can't get unless you have cash pay. And half the time, the services that are available aren't the best of the services that we should be offering.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to turn this around on you because I have a question for you. So as a person who has been looking through this from different angles, right? Have you found that a lot of people are doing a lot of things, but the things they're doing seem to be more like they're tripping over each other? You know what I mean? There's not consistency, right? There's not synchronicity. So that's the problem, with getting anything done, because everybody's doing things and a lot of people are doing the same thing with a lot of same focus, but no one knows what the other one's doing, right? And I find that really needs to be addressed.
Okay, so I've been doing this 21 years, and about 5 years ago, I realized how broken our system really was. And I was clinical director in a facility, and it was all about heads in beds. The owner came in his souped-up car, and his wife in her souped-up car, and half of us couldn't pay our rent. And I'm looking at everyone, and I'm like, what the hell? We're the working poor. I'm putting in 60 hours a week. I'm burnt, not giving the clients my best because I'm burnt. And I said, something's wrong. Yeah. And I started talking to my colleagues, and I went back into private practice. And I said, that's it. I'm doing private practice, and I'm only doing a specific type of client. From there, I started morphing coaching and therapy, and it started to work. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, this is, and this is just when recovery coaching was coming out. And I created the Addictions Academy, which is the largest online virtual school for addiction. We have 40 classes. We're in 22 countries. We have 20 teachers across the U.S. It's insane. And that's what we do. We teach recovery coaching and life coaching and family coaching, boots on the ground stuff, entry level. You don't need a degree to come and do this, because that's what it's always been. It's always been you need a master's degree to counsel. Well, that's great. But if you have somebody in recovery who's got 5 years clean who says, I want to help, they're not going to go to school for 5 years and wait to help the population. So that's what we do. And
exactly.
Amongst us colleagues, there's a battle. It's the counselors versus the coaches. It's like, well, you didn't take 5 years of education. And I say, listen, I've got a PhD. I've got almost 11 years of education. And I can tell you, I learned more my first day working in the prison. That was my first job. I got my internship at SCI Rockview. I learned more in 3 months at the prison than I had learned in 4 years at Penn State University. Right there. And people are floored, and they're like, well, why? Because I'm working in real time. So people who have, like yourself, you've got experience on the trauma side. You've been a victim. You've been an addict. You've been the family member of an addict. You've been the mother of an addict. You've been to prison. You've got this well-rounded ability to help people. And that's gold. And I think that's where we're at.
I don't know about that, because it's been really hard to find a niche, because what happens is people, if you have a passion and you have, you know what needs to be done, but yet I'm the type of person that wants to work with other people. I'm very open to ideas. You do have so much of that infighting, which is so unfortunate, because everybody wants to know it all. Everybody wants to drive things. And when it comes to, for instance, I'm going to say something very controversial, but a lot of these moms, they're the most passionate advocates we can have. But unfortunately, a lot of times after a child is lost, they name the foundations of the projects after the children. And for the public, I believe it comes, it sort of comes off a certain way. So I decided I'm not going to name my project after Kirstyn. She's my motivation and my inspiration, but she doesn't resonate with the rest of the country. This is a problem that's happening now, and her spirit is with me, but I need to move forward on this. But I find that there's so much, and I've been told that this happens a lot with nonprofit stuff, but it's unfortunate because everybody's trying to get at the money, right? And you have all of this disparity. And I find people in recovery have to give back. If they really are truly involved in their recovery and they care, they have to. It's like a compulsion. Not everybody that's in recovery is suited to be working with people or with, the public. But a lot of them are. And a lot of them can be sort of, coached and whatever, groomed to do that. And they should be able to do that because I think it'd fill the need. But I just find there's a lot of dysfunction, and I think it has to do with any of nonprofit work, ego, that sort of thing. And it is, you would think that the experience would be gold, and especially since I'm so agreeable to wanting to work with everybody. But I've been met with a lot of obstacles, and it's almost like you wonder if people really do want a solution. I just sound cynical, but sometimes I think that.
You're talking to the person that's been dragged through the mud. And I'm going to tell you, when I went back in private practice in 2012, when I started the academy, and I went up against the big players, I got called everything in the book. Slander, defamation of character. Somebody posted I was wanted by the FBI, and I'm like, are you effing kidding me? And
wow.
I was like, and these are colleagues. These are people that are on Good Morning America. These are people on Dr. Oz doing this that are supposed to be helping people. And I went up against them. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to be the person that rolls over because you're going to strong arm me. And I've been fighting them for about 4 years. And it's finally calmed down. I've got a lawsuit going against them because no one would touch these people. And it comes from all directions. You've got the colleagues going, you can't do this because I've got more education than you, or whatever they want to argue. And then you've got the moms going, well, you shouldn't be doing this because you don't believe in what I believe in, and we're not aligned. And then you've got people who don't like that you're successful going, I'm going to tear you down because you're more successful than me. It's nonsense. I've never been in such a convoluted, hateful industry of people that are supposed to be helping. And
well, Kat, let me tell you, I have gone without a salary for almost 2 years doing this. It's almost cost me my soul. And I didn't do it because I'm trying to be like Jesus. That's not why it happened that way. It happened that way because I couldn't find the right niche for me. And what I found was, if somebody learns to fix cars, right, and they're fixing cars all their lives, and they go and open up a place, no one says one word about that experience making them an expert, right? But when someone has been through such hell and then goes and gets the grooming they need to do whatever and needs to support themselves, they're a valuable asset and needs to support themselves, they are torn down for making a living, trying to give back to others, a modest living even. We're not talking about getting rich and famous, we're just, regular living. These people are being torn down for doing that. And I would suggest this. If these people don't earn a living and you want them to, like I have, work 16 hours a day, how do you suggest they sustain themselves? You know what I mean? At some point, it makes no sense. And yet, people can go out there and they can do other things and no one questions it. But the person in recovery, the addict in recovery, for some reason, there's judgment about them jumping into this and trying to help and also being reintegrated back into the economy, right? There's so much judgment and
exactly.
Right?
It's exactly. And I was on Facebook and I had a woman post on my wall that how dare I take money from suffering addicts. And I went to her wall and did a little research, and she's a nurse for cancer. So I answered her and I said, okay. I said, so I'm not allowed to pay my light bill or my mortgage. And she said, find a different career. You should be doing this for free. And I said, why? And she goes, these people are inflicted with a disease. And I said, perfect. You're a cancer nurse. Don't people who have cancer have a disease? And she said, yes. I said, do you get a paycheck or do you work for free? And she goes, that's different. I said, how is that different? If they're both classified as disease, and you're a cancer nurse or you're a cancer doctor, you work in the ER, and you're doing something in the healthcare industry, why am I not allowed to get a paycheck? Because you've deemed it that I'm not allowed. You've judged me. And I went on to school her, and I said, this is exactly the problem. You're the problem. You're the reason people can't get services. Because you decided somebody shouldn't get paid for their time and effort to deal with your child. Now, tell me why. Why should I not get paid to deal with your child? And she went on a rant, and I said, this is the problem in our industry. Nobody wants to back down and let us do our job, and we deserve to be paid. And I will go to bat for anybody who says that. We deserve to be paid, and we deserve to make a living. Now, I'm not talking about milking people for millions of dollars, but
exactly. But the treatment industry does that, and no one says much about it. But here I am right now. There's many times lately I've been like, hey, this is it. I can't do it anymore because I can't survive. If I can't survive, if I can't, you know what I mean, pay for my everyday whatever, then I can't do this. And they'll say, well, do it for free and then have another career. Well, I did that. And you know what? Because I do give everything I have to what I do. I gave them 12 hours a day, and then by the time I got home, I had nothing left to give. And that's the issue.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more once we wrap up the podcast on that. I have an idea for you. Let's go ahead and plug your website, your movie, your Twitter, your Facebook, and then we'll wrap up for the listeners.
Awesome. So our website is www.recoveredpurpose.org, and that's all one word, exactly how it's supposed to be spelled. And you'll find information there on the events we're scheduling. We're scheduling events with speakers such as Tim Ryan of Dope Man and a Man in Recovery Foundation, Brandon Novak of the Jackass series and the author of Dream Seller. We have, Michael DeLeon of Steered Straight, who has a very successful curriculum program out of New Jersey that we're trying to spread the word across the country for, school for substance abuse education and bullying, gangs, that sort of thing, as well as a few others in the emergency worker, sector who have experience with addiction. And so that's basically, we're going to be doing public speaking events, driving the message of what we're trying to do, consulting to drug courts and to programs, et cetera, and then, helping with the development and implementation of this program, peer-to-peer resources in the community. So I've got the website. We have the Facebook page at Recovered Purpose, Twitter at Recovered Purpose, Instagram, the whole nine. Basically, that's about it, We're having an event in Connecticut on October 14th. This is going to be our first to kick things off in New Haven, at the Meriden Green Amphitheater, and we intend on drawing a pretty good crowd there. We're going to be basically bringing on the treatment industry, those, of course, the ethical players in the treatment industry, a few of them, community, law enforcement, some of us, and basically we're going to be driving the message of everybody working together to do more. That means families, parents, different nonprofit groups setting aside their agendas and their egos to kind of, try to find a solution, or at least something that will slow the hemorrhage.
That sounds great. I thank you for coming on today, and our listeners can find you at Recovered Purpose. And of course, the movie that you've got coming out would be fantastic, called Chasing the Dragon, and they can reach you.
Chasing the Dragon is, not to interrupt you, but Chasing the Dragon is already out. It can be found on YouTube. We also have DVDs that are issued. They've already put it in schools all over, but many of them are still rolling it out. But you can go to the FBI website and get an actual DVD or with a study guide, or you can actually view it on YouTube. But they're going to be pushing out for the program, which they're going to call the Chasing the Dragon Project, which is going to be, focused on prevention education at schools.
Sounds great. And I thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great.
Great. Wonderful. And thank you to our listeners for listening to Unpause Your Life. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you, guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape, in love with my pain. I may be awake, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gate. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. To believe. I took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying. Now I'm so far from solid ground. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do.